Welcome to this month's installment of Brass Chats, brought to you by Monster Oil. What is this? 21 year?
Today we are very lucky to have a great trumpet player in the Boston Symphony Orchestra. His name is Mike Martin. He plays third utility in the symphony. And thanks a lot for being here, man.
Hey, absolutely. Pleasure.
So the reason we wanted to talk to you, we were very excited with your online presence. Mm-hmm. You do a lot of goofy videos with regarding or involving the World Series, the St. Louis Symphony. There was also the video you did with Tom Hooten for the National Brass Symposium. What is so attractive about that aspect of like getting information out to you?
The perception of orchestral musicians at the professional level, to me, needs some tweaking. The demographic of players in major orchestras is getting younger. Just in the Boston Symphony, the last, I think, 10 or 12 auditions we've hired, I don't think we've hired a single person over 40. And wow. I think we've hired 6 or 7 people under 30. So the average age of the orchestra is coming down, not just here, but everywhere. Several friends of mine that I went to school with at Northwestern, not just brass players, but string players, wind players, are all just phenomenal musicians that are getting jobs in these really prestigious places, and they're not, all of us together, I think, and not just in orchestras, but in military bands and big bands and in the theater world in New York on Broadway. All of these really young players are coming onto the scene that just can play anything and are also fantastic musicians, but they haven't lost that millennial vibe of not taking things too seriously. And I think it's hard to shirk an image that's 100 years old, but this very kind of stuffy top button always buttoned, and we always wear ties really tight, and I think it would do us well to kind of shake that. And I don't really know anyone, especially here in Boston, in this orchestra that is really like that. Pretty much everyone here is a lot more fun-loving and easygoing and has just these really just ridiculous and awesome senses of humor. So when I got here 5 years ago, I was 24. I was the youngest person in the orchestra, and I felt like when I got here, I felt like I got to walk the line and kind of tiptoe and make sure I dot my I's and cross my T's, because I want to get tenure and I don't want to offend anyone. And after a couple of weeks, I got ribbed. I got ribbed so hard when I got here, just for being young and for making really dumb mistakes that young guys always make. And in a way, it was a little embarrassing at times, but at the same time, really disarming and quite a relief to see all of these guys that were not only great players and great musicians, but to see that they had just these awesome senses of humor as well.
That's cool. That's great. So you think maybe the younger generation is easing things up? Because in that video, for example, the World Series video you guys did, everyone just seems like they're having a great time and just having a ball with the arrangement. The back and forth thing is really creative. Even the old guys, they're having a blast. Yeah,
that's the thing is, I like to compare what we do to baseball, ironically enough, in that it's a really long season. We play almost 200 concerts a year, but in the same way, it still feels like a game. It still feels like I'm just a kid picking up my instrument every day. That's how much fun we all have doing it. And I think the danger can be, if you start to take it too seriously and you start to get focused on the wrong things, that image that has been kind of difficult for us to shirk for so long can creep its way in. But for everyone here and everyone in St. Louis, for sure, working with them on that project, it was very clear that all of those people, all of us, we have so much fun doing what we do for a living, and we're so fortunate. I think it's important for us. That was kind of the spirit of that video. Kind of the underlying tone was we're so fortunate to have this opportunity, both as players and doing this as a profession, but also it was so fortuitous to have 2 storied baseball clubs playing each other, in 2 cities with 2 phenomenal orchestras and with great brass sections. So
you grew up with a a dad in the music world. You grew up with a brother in the music world. Anybody else in the family?
My mother, actually, Linda,
Yeah.
she sings in the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra chorus. I think she's won 4 Grammys with them. Yeah. So she's been in that for about 10 or 12 years, right about the time I went to school.
So what was that like, growing up with such a saturated family?
Yeah, I think it was cool, you know. My dad always said I never really had a choice. You know, not because they forced anything on me, but because it was so enjoyable. It was such a wonderful household. I mean, I did everything as a kid. Like I was exposed to music constantly. I was exposed to drum corps, to orchestra, to jazz, to wind ensemble, everything. But I also played every sport imaginable. I played soccer, baseball, tennis, golf growing up. So you know, my parents were very they were extremely, they were dedicated and determined that just because everyone else in the family was really music related, they were determined that that wasn't going to dictate whether or not I went into music. So, and we had several talks when I was finishing high school, deciding where I wanted to go to school, about if this is something you really want to do, it needs to be your choice. That, you know, it doesn't need to be because Chris is so successful, or your dad is so successful, or your mom, or whatever. It just needs to be something that you desperately want to do.
Do you remember the first time you picked up a trumpet?
Yeah. It was the summer before 6th grade. So my brother was, that was the summer of '96. So my brother was about to start his senior year at Eastman, and he was upstairs practicing. So I went up, and there was like an old Getson cornet that my dad had. It had like an LBJ for the USA sticker, and
oh, sweet.
On the case it was from it was from a ways back. So and I heard my brother playing I think some Chickless Flow Studies or something, and I'd been hearing him doing that for 10 years. And I went up and I was like, I want you to teach me how to play the trumpet right now. He was like okay. So he gave me this little cornet and taught me like one exercise, like how to go from like G to F sharp on this cornet. And I think it was an okay sound I made, you know, but I was like, yeah, this is cool. It feels really funny, but this is awesome.
So when did the moment come when you decided you were going to school? Because you went to Northwestern. Mm-hmm. It was just sort of a thing. You never imagined yourself doing anything else? Was that the vibe?
Yeah, I think looking back on it, I didn't feel like I was too young to be making that decision at the time, but looking back on it, the fact that I made that decision at that point is kind of mind-boggling to me. But I was 13 in 8th grade, and I had been playing golf since I was 3, since basically I could walk and hold a golf club, and I was in love with that and in love with the trumpet. And in 8th grade, I think I made All-State. I made like first chair in All-State, and I'd never made All-State. I'd like barely made like the little district honor band in my town before that, and all of a sudden I'm like 8th grade. You know, you're the #1 player in the state. And I was like, wow. And I'd worked really, really hard, but through some tears and just like anger and just, you know, when you're 12, 13 years old, the work ethic it takes to be the best at something doesn't really jive with the fact that you want to watch cartoons every day.
Right.
But when that happened, you know, and I had that success, and I looking back realized how much I'd actually loved doing that work. I think that kind of outweighed the enjoyment I had of playing golf, a couple of times a week and playing on my middle and high school golf team. So I think it was like March or April of 1999, and I was not yet 14 years old, and I knew what I wanted to do, and I knew that my brother had studied with Charlie and Barbara at Eastman, but they were now at Northwestern. So my attention going into high school turned to my grades because I was never the world's best student. So I knew I had to get into Northwestern. I had to get into the trumpet studio first, and that was my main focus. And then a narrow second behind that was to make sure my grades were such that I could get into the university like that.
Yeah.
So.
When you first got in the orchestra, did any funny things happen? Any funny stories? Tell me something funny.
Yeah, so I started at Tanglewood in the summer, which at the time seemed like a great idea, but going from college and freelancing where you play maybe like 2 concerts a month to the Tanglewood season where you play 3 concerts a week and they're all different programs was a little daunting. So you find yourself in some uncomfortable situations as a 24-year-old. So we were doing Mahler 2 with Michael Tilson Thomas, and it was literally the first concert I ever played as a professional musician in the Boston Symphony. So we were in rehearsal. It was like, I want to say it was like 97 degrees outside. You know, we're in the shed at Tanglewood, so there's no air conditioning. We're all just sweltering. And he was working on something in the second movement, and I didn't play. I don't think I play anything in the second movement. Playing fourth on that. So I was just kind of. He was working on something with the strings, and I was like kind of following along. I had my score with me, and I was just being very, a really good new member of the orchestra. I was doing going the extra mile. I was just kind of following along, and he was singing, and he got to a spot, and he was singing this spot where he wanted to go back to start, and he didn't know where it was off the top of his head, so he asked the front desk's strings. He was like da 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 da. Where is that? Where is that? What number do I want to go back to? And before anyone had a chance to answer, I was looking right at it, and I just yelled out 20 from the back of the orchestra, and the whole brass section just went, what? And I like shrunk to the size of a pea. I was sweating even more. Everyone just kind of got hushed. Tilson Thomas didn't notice, thankfully, and he just kind of kept going. But the rest of the brass section, they still call me the number 20 to this day. So they were just jabbing me left and right. Tom Rolfs was like, Mike, do you need anything? Can I get you anything? If you're running this rehearsal, I don't want you to get tired. Toby Off was like, Mike, how do I sound? Do I sound good? Jamie Somerville turned around and was like, is there anything else you need? Should we go back to 19 instead of 20? And that was one of those moments where it was supremely embarrassing, and it's very cathartic for me to get it out and let the world know that it happened. But
some good old-fashioned hazing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It was also kind of, disarming at the same time. So after a couple of stiff drinks that night, I woke up the next morning feeling a little bit better about myself. But that was a good way to get initiated to the orchestra.
Something that a lot of people want to know, since you're so young with so much success, is what your audition was like. Can you give me the rundown without releasing too much confidential information?
Sure, yeah.
Or feel free to if you want. If you want to tell us anything awesome.
This was my, I think this was my 15th audition. I think that's right. Yeah. 15th audition, and I had auditioned here twice before. And the first time was for assistant principal, the job that Tom Siders now plays. And I made the finals in that, so the way we do it here is if whatever round you kind of make it to, for subsequent auditions, if you don't win any job in the section that there's an audition for after that, you get invited to the round previous. So for my audition here that I ended up winning, I was invited to the semifinals. And the audition was actually for second trumpet. Peter Chapman had just retired, and it's the job Ben Wright now has. So I played my semifinal round, and I think it was pretty standard. Our goal here in our audition process, I think I can divulge this without breach of contract or anything, but our goal in our audition process, or early on in the prelims and the semis, is always to hear everyone give their the absolute best example of themselves. So our lists are never super strenuous, that we kind of pride ourselves, in the brass section at least, we pride ourselves on we want you to play well. So the semifinal list was very standard. It was Pictures and Leonore and Mahler 5, and I think like Carmen was in there, a low thing because it was a second trumpet audition, and so that was fine. And then I felt like I played really well. They were like, "Can we hear this again?" Blah blah, which is almost always a good sign. And I felt like I was playing great, and go down. They come down and let us know, like, we want to hear these people again in the finals, and my number was called, which was great. But they told us, they were like, just so you know, this could be a pretty long process. So you could have 1 or 2 or even 3 rounds left today. So don't overtax yourself between now, on the lunch break, don't play a bunch. And the committee is going to keep that in mind as well. We want you to stay as fresh as possible. So it's like great, it was a super healthy environment, and felt very encouraged. So I went and grabbed lunch, had like half of a salad because that's all I can ever eat on audition days because I'm just nervous. It's like 2 o'clock. I'm the first person in finals, and I think there's 5 of us or 6 of us. So I go down, and after I finish lunch, I warm up for like 5 or 10 minutes. They come and get me. And I'm like, okay, I feel pretty good. I feel fresh. You know, like they said, don't overplay, so I feel good. So I get out there, and the way we do auditions in the finals is we don't release a list, or at least we didn't in that one. Maybe they did, and I just didn't look at it, which is the way I prefer to take auditions. I don't want to know what's coming. You know, I'd rather just take one excerpt at a time and stay in the moment and all that. But so we started, and it was something standard, pictures, whatever. He turned it, something else pretty standard, you know, like Petrushka or something. And then we started getting into the second trumpet excerpts. Played one, went fine. Played another one, went fine. And before I realized it, I've played like 14 excerpts, and it won't stop. Like I play, and something like from Mahler 6, and then followed by something from like Dvorak 8. You know, it's like just all over the horn, scattered completely. And like I lost track eventually. Like I think I stopped counting at 9, and then I felt like half a dozen more. And I walked off the stage and like looked at my watch and realized I just played for like 20 minutes. And I was like, what was that he said about staying fresh? So, and I felt, you know, I missed a few things. It wasn't a no perfect audition, but I was kind of 50-50. I was like, maybe, you know, maybe we'll see. So they come down and they tell us that Ben Wright has actually won the audition for second trumpet, but they'd like to hear 3 of us for fourth trumpet in the eventuality that Ben, you know, gets tenure and all that. So they were, instead of kind of holding a separate audition altogether, they wanted to hear a few of us that they were really interested in to fill that vacancy in the event that the committee voted to do that. So they took a separate vote, and the committee said, yeah, let's hear those players for that spot only. So there were 3 of us. It was unscreened. I played with Tom Rolfs, just some relatively standard second trumpet stuff, Beethoven Violin Concerto, Beethoven 5. And we get to Beethoven 5, which is the last thing, played a couple of other things, and we start the last movement, and you know, most people know Beethoven is in C major. You know, it's very famously in C major. And I looked at the last movement, and we started, and it starts in this really beautiful, this grand C major chord, the first brass entrance. And for whatever reason, I decided that it was going to be in D instead, up a whole step. So instead of a really beautiful C and E, you hear a C and an F sharp, which is just the most grating interval you could possibly imagine. And I played it so convincingly and so strongly that it kind of scared Tom, and he stopped and but tried to play another note at the same time, and I freaked out. And I was like, I just blew it. I totally blew it. And he was like, it's okay. Tom was like, calm down. And he whispered, he's like, it's in C. Like a whisper, but loud enough for the committee to hear and kind of snicker. We played it, and the rest of it was fine. And so obviously it all worked out. So yeah. you can miss notes or mistranspose, right? And still do well. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
So what did you learn along the way? What is necessary? What is not necessary? What do people need to work on? How do they diagnose themselves? What is auditions, I guess, is a good question.
I would say the thing that I notice the most in students that I work with, and whether they're students at New England Conservatory or Boston University who are some of the leading young players in the country, or if it's our brass players at the Cavaliers or students in my father's high school band, people are so averse, I find, consistently to listening to themselves, recording themselves, and listening with as critical an ear as they can, because I still struggle with doing this consistently, because it can be humbling to listen to yourself 100% objectively. So I started, for this audition in particular, I was working on some things just in my own fundamental playing that, no one ever wakes up 100% every day, and if you do, you can be guaranteed tomorrow it's not going to be 100%. So we all have the things that we're working on, and I had my own little things, but I would say the biggest difference in this audition and others, and I'd made the finals, I think, in 7 or 8 auditions, and in different capacities, for second trumpet, for principal trumpet in San Francisco, and for assistant here, and second in Baltimore, and all kinds of different arrays of styles of playing. But I think for me, what separated this experience from all the others was the fact that I had been so diligent every single day about recording myself, playing through a mock audition round, and you know, almost to the point of like turning the lights out so it was pitch black. So I really created as much anonymity as possible for the sounds I was hearing on the recording, and being as critical as I possibly could. And that's something I know that I know Mark Inouye does a lot, and that my brother has done a lot in his preparations, is he just vigorously and religiously records himself. Yeah. So because once you get to the point that you objectively can say about your own playing, yeah, I would buy that CD, or I would hire that person. You can be pretty sure that most, if not all, people around you are going to feel the same way if you're really objective. You know,
yeah.
So.
Do you have any funny audition stories?
Yeah. So 2 days, actually about this audition that I ended up winning. 2 days before I was living in Chicago, and 2 days before I flew out here, I think the audition was on a Monday. On Saturday morning, like late Friday night or early Saturday, I started. My throat started to get really sore because it was in February. Chicago was windy, and you know I was not taking great care of myself. So I was coming down with strep throat 2 days before this audition, which is perfect timing. So I call our family doctor at home, and I'm like, can you prescribe me a Z-Pack, some steroids to try and knock this out in the next couple days? He was like, yeah, absolutely. It's go pick it up in an hour. So I did that. Started taking medication, and by the time the audition came around, I felt a little bit better, but I was still very much throat and everything. It made it hard to breathe. As if that wasn't enough, Sunday morning, before I flew out Sunday evening, I was eating a cookie, and it was like a peanut butter cookie, and I bit down into something hard. It like felt like a peanut, like maybe there was like a whole peanut in this peanut butter cookie, and like back there, and it was like I was like, oh, that's weird. Why would they put a whole peanut in this thing? I like kind of spit some of the cookie out, and my tooth was in my hand from like the back of my mouth, like my molar.
Your tooth fell out.
My tooth fell out of my mouth, and I had strep throat about 24 hours before coming to take this audition. And I was like, what? I was like, really? What am I supposed to do? Can I put my tooth back in my head? No, I can't. So I called my brother, and I was like, do you have a dentist you recommend? Because he knew, I was playing for him every day, and he knew I was coming down with strep and like really sick, and I told him my tooth fell out of my mouth, and he was like, yeah, here's the number of my dentist. Go see him today. Most of the people in the Chicago Symphony go to this guy. And he was great, and he was having lunch with Tage Larson at the time, fourth trumpet in Chicago, and he told me later, like a couple of days later, that he hung up the phone and Tage asked what happened, and he told him, and Tage just looked at him and was like, sometimes you're just not meant to win an audition. And, strep throat, your tooth falls out of your head. Like, what are you supposed to do? So we had it was an emergency thing, and what it ended up being was that I had a crown put on when I was really little, and that like the glue in that crown ended up, failing and coming out or whatever. So and that's what ended up happening. It wasn't, my dental hygiene isn't such that I literally have tooth falling out of my nose.
So that's the secret to winning auditions.
So apparently the secret is distract yourself with as many unfortunate circumstances as possible.
Great.
You should be good.
Let's talk about what you do outside of trumpet.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard rumors that you do lots of CrossFit training.
Mm-hmm.
You play golf, like you mentioned earlier.
Yep.
Are those pretty much the two big things that you really enjoy?
I would say those are two of the three. CrossFit is something I started doing in 2009. I was introduced to it through a friend from high school, and just absolutely became obsessed with it. And it's been about 5.5 years now I've been doing it. I've been coaching for 3 years, so kind of very part-time on the side. I coach at CrossFit Arsenal here in town and a little bit at CrossFit Boston. But I also golf as well. Golf was, for me it was either golf or trumpet, and I figured I could always play golf on the weekends, which I've kind of continued to do. But since I've been fortunate enough to have the stability of the job in the orchestra, I've been able to focus more on golf, and I got my handicap down, trying to get it down below 1.5. Because once you get to 1.4, then you can try to qualify for the U.S. Open. which is a goal just to be able to qualify. I have no aspirations of playing in the U.S. Open because that's not possible.
You don't want the fame and the money. Yeah, it's too much.
You know, just like a lot of people want that, and I think they're just kind of shallow for wanting that much money. You know, I don't need millions of dollars. I just need $1 million.
You're also involved with Drum Corps, correct? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm the brass co-caption head at the Cavaliers Drum and Bugle Corps in Rosemont, Illinois, and I spent 8 years before that with the Phantom Regiment in Rockford, Illinois. So it's a little bit of a strange departure because those two have historically been rivals, you know, friendly rivals, but rivals nonetheless. But it was the right move to make at the right time for me and my father, who I teach with, and it's something that I really value because I love working with students, especially young high school, college age students, and the energy and passion that the guys in the Cavaliers bring to their rehearsal and their preparation it's electrifying and extremely addictive, and it's hard to find anything that compares to that kind of atmosphere where everyone's united in a single goal, and it's something that I get to do with my dad, which is really special for me because you know my parents still live in Atlanta and I'm up here, my brother's in Chicago, and it's a way for my dad and me and my mom, when she's able to come up, to kind of all meet in one place and do one thing at the same time that we all love. My father founded the Spirit of Atlanta in 1976, so he's been involved in Drum Corps for 40 years now almost. So,
what's the biggest thing you can learn from Drum Corps? What can the orchestral trumpet player take away from several summers doing hard work?
To be honest with you, I use every day, and this is not an exaggeration or at all false, but I use what I learned in Drum Corps every day because in terms of ensemble, balance, and blend and timing, playing in an orchestra is incredibly similar to what you do on a drum corps field. But when you're doing it on a drum corps field, the environmental demands are so extreme that once you're sitting on a stage, the solution for ensemble and timing and balance problems are actually extremely manageable. The solutions are easy to find. So, you know, when you're working with a brass section of 80 players that have to balance with a marching percussion section of 25, and then a front ensemble section that has mallets and auxiliary percussion instruments and synthesizers with all of these crazy sounds that are amplified, and you have to figure out a way to balance those in different stadiums, whether it's Lucas Oil where the Colts play or a small high school stadium in the middle of a week at a show. You know, you have to use your ears in a way that is so much more finessed and nuanced than you do just sitting in one brass section. And granted, playing in a symphony brass section has its own demands and challenges and rewards. But what I find in teaching drum corps, especially at this level with the Cavaliers and with the great guys that we have and the great staff that we have, is it's kind of like playing in a professional orchestra on the most massive steroids you can find. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
I got one question. One last question, big question for you. You can paint this however you want. You can make it up, or you can whatever you want to do. Mm-hmm. Walk us through the most amazing musical experience you've ever had in your life.
Oh, all right. It's 2006. I just finished my first summer as a Tanglewood Fellow, and there's a trumpet player from Sufjan Stevens' band. Sufjan Stevens is this indie rocker, indie like pop piano rock, and the trumpet player from his band, his name is CJ Cameriri, approached me and Ethan Bensdorf, who's my roommate and one of my groomsmen, who's now second trumpet in the New York Philharmonic. After we'd played this kind of crazy Mark Anthony Turnage piece at a chamber music concert, and asked us, he was like, "Hey, do you guys know who Sufjan Stevens is?" We were like, "Yeah, totally." He was like, "Do you guys want to play in the band on like one concert? We're coming through Chicago and Milwaukee. We'd love to have you guys play. We need a second trumpet player for those two shows. You guys want to split it?" We were like, "Yeah, definitely." So Ethan played the Milwaukee show and I played the Chicago show, and that concert was, I mean, it wasn't a concert, it was a show in every sense of the word. We all came out wearing like like just kind of these like utility custodian outfits, but with like butterfly wings and like these crazy like burlesque masquerade masks, the whole band. And it was like a 12, 14 piece band. Sufjan came out playing banjo, and he's got backup singers, and there's 2 trumpets, saxophone, I think, a couple of violins, drums, bass, and it was in the Riviera Theater, which holds like maybe 1,200 people, and there had to have been at least 1,500 at this show. And everyone in this band can play. I mean, this is not just like a pick up the local musicians that want to play a gig for $100. I mean, it didn't pay a whole lot, but it didn't matter. What it didn't pay in money, it made up for, more than made up for in experience. And the electricity of that group was extremely similar to what I experience here in the orchestra in some of our bigger concerts, and certainly in the drum corps activity and some of our bigger performances and bigger shows. Everyone was so united and on the same page. They're all just dedicated to the groove of the concert and that individual tune. We did one tune in particular called Snowbird, and it was like 12 minutes long. And it was some of the loudest playing I've ever done, because we're battling with drums and guitars that are all amped in this small theater. And it was, I mean, the audience, the crowd, how engaged they were. They all knew every single word. And it's one of the most, if you don't know it, I highly recommend checking it out, Sufjan Stevens' Snowbird. It's one of the most just purely beautiful rock tunes you're going to find anywhere. And it was the unification of the group, how kind of solidified and dedicated and consistently everyone was devoted to the same goal, was surprising in that kind of environment, So I would say every concert I've played in the BSO has been great, and I've got a lot of great drum corps memories, but playing a single show with Sufjan Stevens was probably my most incredible memory. Yeah.
Okay. We end all of our interviews with what we call the monster round.
Right.
They're rapid fire questions, so short answers, one word if you can.
Right.
Let's just blow through them, okay?
Okay.
Bowling or racquetball?
Bowling.
Times New Roman or Ariel?
Times New Roman.
Favorite place to eat in Boston?
Chipotle.
What's your handicap? We talked about that earlier.
1.8.
Your max squat?
Back squat?
Yeah.
305.
In kilometers per hour, how fast can you run?
24.
V-neck undershirts or crew neck undershirts?
Oh God, V-neck.
Best lead trumpet player of all time?
John Faddis.
Ella Fitzgerald or Billie Holiday?
Billie Holiday.
Favorite place to play the trumpet?
Symphony Hall, Boston.
Your best excerpt?
Pictures.
Your worst?
Pictures.
Proudest accomplishment?
Marrying my wife.
Aw. Most people you've ever played for?
25,000 DCI Finals 2004.
Costco or BJ's?
Costco.
You're standing on top of the Empire State Building wearing a corset.
Chipotle. Sorry.
That works. Best car you've ever driven?
BMW M3.
Wingsuit or hot air balloon?
Hot air balloon.
Longest time you've taken off trumpet?
10 days.
Scarlett Johansson or Natalie Portman?
Scarlett Johansson.
Who is the greatest singer of your generation?
Renee Fleming.
The best foreign orchestra?
Ooh. Vienna Philharmonic.
What is the most beautiful melody ever written?
I'd say the first movement of Brahms' Violin Concerto.
Mike Martin, it's really nice to meet you. Thank you for sitting down with us.
Absolutely, it's been a pleasure.